All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Nikon TV. My name is Chris Hoganek, your host, and let's jump right into this episode. Now, what are we going to be talking about today? Well, this is thanks to a recommendation we got a little whiles back asking about differences between the Z bodies. Can I talk about maybe some situations where the Z6 is better than the Z5, or some cases where the Z5 is better than the Z6? So I'm going to be going through our entire lineup today, talking about our DX bodies, talking about our full frame bodies, some of the differences between some of the models, why you should consider one over the other. Now, as a very nice little addition to this, just today, we announced a brand new camera to our DX lineup. So I'm going to start it all off talking about that new camera being the Z50. So this is a DX camera. It is slotted just a little bit above the Z50. So very similar underpinnings to the Z50. Same sensor, same autofocus. Well, I'll say the same underpinning of the autofocus system. So the same 209 hybrid AF system, but there are some tweaks to it. So you get some of the modes that we only started to see with the Z6 II and Z7 II, like wide area large for animal and human eye detect. You now have that with the ZFC. So a few other little things, but the basic underpinnings of the Z50 with some benefits. So what are some of those benefits? Well, obviously, for what I think is going to be quite a few people, the first benefit is going to be the actual styling of the camera itself, just the way that it looks. It is obviously styled after more of like an FM2 type of camera, and if you actually have them side by side, it is really difficult to tell them apart. Our designers did a really good job with this camera. So let me do a quick little breakdown of some of the buttons, some of the dials, some of the major features of the camera. So if we kind of start off looking at the top of the camera, you'll see on the left-hand side, that is your ISO dial. So a lot of physical buttons and dials, very tactile feel with this camera, where you're able to go and change from 100 ISO all the way up to the maximum 51,200 ISO, all using that same dial. Plus you have high 1 and high 2. So that dial is up on the left. If you shift over to the right, the next one over there is going to be your shutter speed dial. This is going to allow you to change in one-stop increments if you use the dial itself, your actual shutter speed. But if you decide, no, you know, I like the method I'm used to, I want to actually use the command dial to go and change it, or I want more differentiators between just one-stop increments, well, you can go and switch it to 1/3 step. Now that 1/3 step means that you're able to change it in 1/3 of a stop, but you're able to do that using the command dial. So this is just a little bit easier for people who just want to shoot the way they always do and maybe don't always want to be using every single dial, but you do have that option if you want it. Now that little screen right below the shutter release button is the aperture display window. So that'll always show your current aperture that you have selected. And then beside that, we have the exposure comp switch. Now, there's nothing really too special about that, but what I want to go and put your attention to is that little C. What is that little C doing? Well, I'll actually come back to that in just one second. Okay, so that's the top of the camera itself. So let's actually go and now talk about some of the major improvements from the Z50 up to the new ZFC. Well, the first is if you go and look at the side of the camera, and if you pop off that little weather cover, you'll see that there's a new port here. That is the USB-C port that all of our full frame cameras have switched to. And it's now made its way into the ZFC. So this does a couple things. Yes, it's faster transfer rate speeds, all that good stuff, but that also means that the ZFC has PD, that's power delivery through that USB-C cable. So we first saw this with the Z5, then the Z6 II and Z7 II. Power delivery means that you can actually power the camera. You can have the camera run for extended periods of time by either plugging it into a wall socket, let's say my Mac charger I use all the time, using a USB-C to USB-C cable. You can go plug it into your computer even, or if you have an approved USB PD power bank. That's one of the small little USB power banks. You can go and carry that around, plug it into here, and you'll get way, way longer battery life than you would just by running off the batteries in the camera itself. So that's a major improvement, because the next feature of this camera is the flip out screen. So this is the first fully flipping out LCD screen that we have introduced within our mirrorless lineup. This is generally because most of the people who want the full flip out screen are going to be the content creators. They're going to be vlogging, they're going to be taking selfies, whatever it might be, and they want to be able to see it from the front. Well, a lot of photographers want the approach that we've taken up to this point, which is just the tilting screen, because it goes completely on axis with the actual camera itself. So it's a little bit easier to shoot stills, but for video, for those content creators, that flip out screen can make a really big difference. So it does have a large 3-inch screen. I didn't mention, but it does have an EVF as well. It's the same EVF that's found in the Z50. Very high resolution, quite large as well. Really good, really realistic view that you get from that. But in continuing talking about this flip out screen, I want to bring you back to that little C that I showed you on the exposure comp dial, because that C really comes into its own when you have the camera turned on. And when you actually have it pointed out towards you, you can now use that C to do exposure compensation, so changing the brightness of your video to be brighter or darker, all on the actual screen itself. So normally you would have to kind of fiddle with the dial. It's a bit of a pain. Well, by going and changing it to C, you can now go and hit the plus minus button on the screen, and there's a little switch that, a little bar that comes up that allows you to go and click and drag your finger on it very quickly, so you can make sure that not only is your focus bang on, is your exposure bang on, but your exposure is perfect as well, thanks to that little C button. So we have the flip out screen, we have the USB power delivery, we obviously have the styling of the camera. What else is there? Well, we also get some major benefits that we first saw with the Z6, Z7 II when it comes to SnapBridge. So ever since the beginning of SnapBridge coming out, you have been able to go and remote control your camera. So you can go and take a photo by utilizing SnapBridge with your camera. Okay. But up until very recently, what we actually had is the ability to do it through Wi-Fi only. Wi-Fi only meant that it was a bit of a drain on your battery. So if you were shooting for an extended period of time, then your battery would drain a little bit faster than you may want if you just wanted a very basic trigger. Well, with the Z6, Z7 II, and now with the ZFC, we have the ability to remote control the camera using Bluetooth. So if you're going and shooting, let's say long exposures, landscape stuff, or let's say you're shooting stars, carrying on from what we talked about in the last couple episodes, and you don't have a dedicated trigger that plugs into your camera, well, you can go and use SnapBridge using the Bluetooth option to not drain the battery all that much and just have a very reliable way to trigger the camera. Okay, best of both worlds. So that's the ZFC in a nutshell. There are a few other little small things, but those are the major improvements on top of obviously the very iconic, very vintage look that it has to it. Those are the main reasons to kind of step up to it versus, let's say, a Z50. But talking about the Z50, let's now go and talk about all of the rest of our cameras in our lineup, because I did say at the top of this episode that today was going to be talking about every single model. So let's start with the Z50. The Z50, okay. When you do a comparison between mirrorless and DSLR, the comparative DSLR is going to be roughly the D7500. There's a few features here or there where the D7500 is a little bit better, or the Z50 might be a little bit better, but roughly they're going to be on par. I'll say that they're generically going to be equivalent models in the two different mirrorless and DSLR camps. Now, when I recommend a DSLR to somebody, the D7500 is only where I really go to when I have a more advanced user, because the camera is a little bit bigger. It's not like a D6, it's not very, very large, but it is a little bit bigger for the beginner user. Somebody who wants something small and compact, it's a little bit too large. And for those beginner users, DSLRs, they definitely have a learning curve when you're just getting into photography. So with all the buttons and dials on a D7500, I usually try and reserve that for higher end users, or maybe somebody who's had a D5000 series camera and wants to kind of step up and really kind of grow. Okay, enough preamble. Let's get to the Z50. Well, that's kind of my point. The Z50, even though on spec-wise, it's pretty much on par and best set in some cases than the D7500, I can recommend that Z50 to so many other different users because it is very small, it is very light, and because mirrorless gives you the ability to pre-visualize your exposure before you even go and shoot, it gives you the ability to learn much, much faster. So with the Z50, I can go and recommend that to somebody who's just getting into photography and they're still able to utilize it with a lot of room to grow. Or you can go and have an intermediate user who wants to step up from, let's say, a D3000, D5000 camera, still want something small and light, but they want some of the advanced features. Well, the Z50 is still right there. Okay, well, what about more advanced users? Well, we actually have somebody at the office. He owns a D5, he owns a D850, so really, really high level user. And when we came out with the Z50, he was one of the first to go and pick one up. He absolutely loves it because it has a lot of the capabilities that he expects from higher end cameras while still being small, light, thrown in his bag, and it's really easy to take around with him because it comes with that very small, compact 16 to 50 millimeter lens. So that's really where the Z50 has this really kind of sweet spot where you can recommend it to a lot of different users, and then you can go and step up. Now that we have the ZFC, if you do want that flip out screen, if you want the PD, the power delivery USB option. So if you're more of a content creator, then the ZFC is just an amazing option for you. Now, one thing I didn't actually mention with the little intro about the ZFC is we actually have some new lenses coming out with it. So with the new ZFC, you can bundle it in a couple different ways. You can either buy it with the what I'll call the almost standard 16 to 50 mil lens, similar to the Z50, but it has been given the silver treatment. So it matches very, very similarly to what the actual body itself looks like. So you can buy it as a bundle one, which is the 16 to 50 silver with the actual body. But if you remember back about a month ago, we actually came out with a development announcement for the 28mm f2.8. Well, the 28mm special edition, which has kind of a knurled edges, it basically has a very old school look, similar as if any prime that you would have bought back in the day with your FM2. Well, it has that same look. So it's a special edition 28mm. That's actually being launched right now prior to the original regular 28mm Z that we announced back at the beginning of June. So you're going to have the option of one with the 16 to 50 mil kit, silver, one as the special edition 28mm, or you can go and buy it body only. So really, really exciting. One other last little quick lens that I'll throw in there, because we're talking about DX, we're actually doing a development announcement at the exact same time as the ZFC is being launched for the new DX Z 18 to 140 mil lens. So this is kind of an all-around usage lens, almost an 8x zoom, but quite wide as well. Really good for people who want to kind of throw one lens on their Z50 or now their ZFC, and being able to kind of go and rock that lens without having to go and change too many lens options. Okay, so that's the Z50 and the ZFC. Now let's jump into full frame. Full frame mirrorless starts with the Z5. But one thing I'll say about the Z5 is I'm a little biased. I do work for Nikon, but I will say that the Z5 is probably the best spec'd entry-level model that we have out right now. It is absolutely amazing. All the things that people don't expect to get with entry-level, you usually don't expect to get in-body image stabilization, full weather sealing, 4K video with some of the brand newest eye detect options in there. So there's a lot that the Z5 goes and gives users, and the type of user I recommend it to is a more generic user If you're not doing a ton of really hardcore video work, if you're not doing a ton of fast action, fast sports, fast wildlife, if you're doing more generic work with the Z5, then it's gonna do everything you need and then some. It has some really, really good features built into it. Great low light capability, great autofocus system. Now, it isn't as good in, let's say, low light as a Z6. So that's one of the areas that a Z6 really kind of takes it a little further, is not only high ISO is a little bit better, but the autofocus detection levels are better in a Z6 as well, which means it can see better in low light. So for any, let's say, event shooters, wedding shooters, wildlife, dusk dawn shooters, then the Z6 and 6.2 in particular really kind of take on to their own at that point. But that being said, we actually, I'm talking examples here from people at the office, but we actually had somebody at the office who was getting rid of some older DSLRs. He is a wedding event shooter, and obviously he made the switch before COVID, but he asked me, he said, Chris, Z5, Z6, what should I do? And my first recommendation to him was go try them. And he actually went and tried them in a couple different scenes, and he said, this Z5 is amazing. So depending on, so while I say that the Z6 is better in low light, there are definitely areas of gray here where, yes, it is better on paper, but depending on how you shoot and what you shoot, the Z5 is most likely going to do a really, really good job for you. And with the money you save, you can go and put that into a couple extra lenses and get yourself some really good Nikon Z lenses. Okay, so now jumping over to the Z6. Now, I'm actually going to separate the next kind of jump up from the Z5 to the Z6 series and the Z7 series. And then I'll kind of separate the Z6, the original Z6 and the Z6 II afterwards, because when you jump from the Z5 to the Z6, you're being a little bit more specialized now. You're either needing the faster speed, continuous frame rate of either the Z6 or the Z7. You want slightly better high ISO capability than what you would get out of the Z5. So you're being much more picky at this point, and picky is not a bad thing at all. Picky is very, very good. Well, I hope I'm a good case of being very picky about my purchases. But basically you're gonna be very picky when it comes to upgrading to a Z6. Is it better video work? You now get N-Log, 10-bit, HLG files you can go and record to an external recorder when you go and upgrade to a Z6 or a Z7. You can also go and pay to get the firmware update for RAW video, whether it be ProRes RAW that you want to use or the Blackmagic RAW. So you're going to be more particular when you're of what you're actually going to shoot and how you're going to use the camera when you start looking at the Z6 and the Z7. Now, to differentiate between the Z6 and Z7, it's not all that difficult. Z6 is going to be the lower light king. It's going to be a little bit better at higher ISOs, faster frame rate, whereas the Z7 is going to be better dynamic range, lower ISO, base ISO at 64, so you're going to get better dynamic range, obviously much higher resolution. We're going from 24 megapixels of both the Z5 and the Z6, not the same sensor though, and then up to 45 megapixels for the Z7 series. So that's really the big differentiator between them. Now, one thing I will mention that a lot of people don't kind of think about is, what camera were you coming from before you made the jump into a Z5, Z6 series, Z7 series? Because if you're coming from a D700, a D750, even a D780, you're going to be at like the 24 megapixel count, that's what you're used to, or D700, like 12 megapixels. But you're used to a lower megapixel count. The Z6 is going to be great for you. But if you're coming from a D800, D810, D850, and I say this with love, you've been spoiled with resolution. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've definitely been bitten by the resolution bug as well. Do I need 45 megapixels all the time? Absolutely not. But I definitely do miss it depending on what I'm shooting. So if you are coming from a higher resolution DSLR, then just keep that in the back of your head that you are going to be making some changes to the way you shoot and your expectations of, let's say, your resolution, how much you can crop, what you can blow up to, if you go and jump into a Z6, Z6 II versus Z7, Z7 II. Okay, so that's the big differences between those, but now let's do the last little breakdown, which is the Z6 versus Z6 II and the Z7 versus Z7 II. Now we've already talked about Z6, Z7. The differences between the first and second generation is very similar between them, so I'll kind of keep them condensed to not bore you all and have you sitting here for 6 hours, because don't tempt me, I will do it. So the version 1 versus the version 2. The version 1 cameras are still amazing cameras. They do amazingly for so many different things. But depending on your needs, the version 2s might be a little bit better. So what are the big differences? Well, for some people, having dual card slots. It doesn't make a big difference to everybody, but it can, depending on what your needs are. If you want to be able to have that knowledge that you're secure with your backups, then a second card slot could make a big difference. For me, the biggest difference is in the speed of the cameras. And I kind of have this like generic speed term because we do have the dual processors, the dual X-Speed 6 processors in the version 2s. And that basically just gives an extra oomph to those cameras, regardless of what it is you're doing. If you're shooting burst mode, you're gonna have slightly less blackout time when you're in the continuous high option. You're gonna get faster continuous high plus options. So you're gonna have faster shooting, but you're also going to have much faster autofocus. Not only in the acquisition of it, but in the tracking of it, and also, as I mentioned earlier, in the low light autofocus detection levels. The version 2s of the cameras, basically if you cut the light in half, and you had a Z6 and a Z6 II, the Z6 II, even by cutting that light in half, you're still going to be able to focus. So the limit of where the cameras can autofocus is definitely lower than their initial camera. So if you are always shooting in very challenging conditions, dusk, dawn, outside with wildlife, if you're shooting a ton of events and you find that you definitely need a little bit more, well, then the Z6 II or Z7 II definitely can make a bit of a difference. While on paper, the autofocus systems, I've mentioned a couple times that they're much faster. On paper, it may not seem that way, but when you talk to people who have used them, specifically, let's say any of our ambassadors, I talk to them quite a bit. Michelle Valberg, Christian Bogner. We also have Brad Hill, photographer, who I had on to talk about the D6 and the 120-300 about a year ago now. Wow, time has flown. He's now rocking the Z6 II and absolutely loving it for his tiny little birds. And if you know, the smaller the bird gets, the faster it moves. And he's able to get some absolutely amazing shots with these new cameras. So on paper, the cameras may not seem that different when it comes to the autofocus speed, but having that dual processor and new algorithms behind them really makes sure that these Z6 and Z6 II and Z7 II cameras really are a powerhouse of for shooting any type of photography, whether it's portraiture, whether it's landscapes, whether it's sports, whether it's wildlife, you name it, these cameras really are able to do it. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode that I'm going to be kind of doing a more generic answer to these. And I did try and kind of mine down a little bit. But if something you're wondering, if you have a very particular situation that you shoot in all the time, and you're curious, well, how does the Z5 work with the Z6 II, work with the Z7 II, work with the Z6? Throw that in the comments below. Throw it in the comments and I'll make sure I get that answered to make sure that you guys, because once you start to mine down to that really, really fine details, it does make it a little bit more difficult to find the answer sometimes. So definitely throw it in the comments below. I've had vast experience with all of these cameras and I'll definitely go and get you an answer. Okay, so talking about throwing comments below, I always mention it, I have to. This entire episode was kind of recommended by a viewer. They asked to talk about Z bodies. So if there's another topic that you guys want to hear about, I talked Z bodies today, maybe you want to hear about Z lenses. Maybe you want to hear a breakdown of some of our lenses. Go and tell me that in the comments below and I will go and build that into the future episodes. All right, but other than that, make sure you go and comment below. Make sure you tell me things you want to hear in the future, situations that you're curious about right now between our bodies and how one body handles it over the other. Make sure you throw that in the comments and I'll answer it. But other than that, that's pretty much it. I don't want to keep you guys here too long. So thank you very much for joining us on another episode of Nikon TV. And all I got to say is, I'll see you in the next episode.